Now that he was a private first class, Minjun found himself at the center of attention. His comrades eagerly awaited his explanation. Minjun began to speak about the training commander who had made him a special offer. This commander, impressed by Minjun's exceptional abilities as a soldier, had sent him to the 104th Battalion on a special recommendation, keen to see him succeed. As Minjun recounted the story, he looked around for their reactions. His comrades' faces were filled with confusion, struggling to grasp the full meaning of his tale. Redhead noted that Kim had come here to start the advancement exams a year in advance, calling him crazy for having the audacity to do so. Lackey pointed out that since Minjun was already a private first class, passing the advancement exam would promote him to corporal. The comrades discussed how, if he succeeded, Minjun might become the most terrifying new recruit in the 104th Battalion. Meanwhile, the actual corporal drowned his sorrows with his maxim, feeling overshadowed. Lackey mentioned that the advancement exam candidates would have an orientation followed by special weapons training. They predicted Minjun would endure a grueling week. As they left the room, they bantered about why they weren't taking the advancement exams themselves, despite being sergeants. Minjun pondered the specialty weapons training, wondering if it differed from special firearms training. Time skipped forward to the orientation for the hunter advancement examinations. The instructor began with a quick overview of how the exams would proceed. Minjun sat attentively, absorbing the information, while others, overconfident in their prior knowledge, barely paid attention. The instructor explained that the examination consisted of two parts, a written exam and a practical exam. The written portion was a basic test, straightforward and easy to understand. Minjun walked out of the orientation feeling confident. He remembered that the practical exam, which would test their stats, specialty weapon proficiency, and monster handling abilities, was what truly mattered. As he prepared for the challenges ahead, Minjun felt a surge of determination. The journey to becoming a corporal was just beginning, and he was ready to face whatever came his way. Minjun knew he would pass the upcoming exam, but he couldn't help but wonder what perks awaited him for achieving a perfect score again. As he walked through the hallway, he decided to take a more serious approach to the examination. The sun rose, signaling the start of specialty weapons training, which involved close-quarters weapons like swords, throwing knives, daggers, maces, and other such implements. The instructor stood above them, ready to impart his knowledge. He ordered the privates and privates first class to pick only swords, and the cadets responded with a resounding acknowledgement. He then commanded the corporals to take their weapons and train far away, threatening dire consequences if they slacked off. Turning his attention back to the rookies, he promised to teach them the basics of swordsmanship from the Hunter Corps' manual but warned them not to follow the guidelines blindly. They needed to use them as a foundation to develop their own styles and adapt to any situation. The instructor's booming voice asked if they understood, and the rookies loudly agreed, knowing they had no other option. He then instructed them to follow his every move and concentrate solely on what he was doing. Even if a distraction as enticing as a naked girl stood to their left, their focus had to remain on him. He picked up a sword and demonstrated incredible moves, flowing like water as he jumped, swiped, dashed, ducked, and slashed. It was clear he had mastered the art of swordsmanship. The rookies stared in awe, and Minjun, in particular, noted the difference in this weapons training. He now understood why it was called specialty weapons training and felt a surge of joy at the prospect of showing off some moves. He knew that one couldn't always rely on rifles when fighting monsters. Honing his skills with a sword was crucial. While the rookies awkwardly swung their swords, revealing their subpar skill levels, Minjun made the air flow around him with his swordsmanship. He was already channeling the power of the specialty weapons, setting himself apart from his peers and proving his exceptional abilities once again. Minjun knew how this worked, while the rest struggled due to a lack of skill. As he swung his sword, he thought this training was better in Isgard. He leapt into the air, his movements so precise they seemed to tear through the very fabric of reality, stunning the rookies. To Minjun, technique was everything, and he effortlessly demonstrated his impressive swordsmanship. The instructor called for a halt and summoned Minjun to the podium. With a mix of curiosity and apprehension, Minjun walked towards the instructor, sword in hand and thoughts racing. The instructor addressed the rookies, criticizing their poor movements and lack of fluidity, and instructed them to take cues from Minjun. Minjun was taken aback. He knew he was good, but he hadn't expected such immediate praise. The instructor pulled out a stick and ordered everyone to follow Minjun's lead. Minjun demonstrated his skills again, each slash of his sword far more spectacular than anything the rookies could muster. The instructor repeatedly pointed out Minjun's technique, urging the rookies to emulate him. Minjun moved with grace and precision, his sword carving through the air before he landed on his knees, exhausted. The rookies stood in awe, unable to fathom replicating Minjun's performance. As Minjun sat, worn out from essentially serving as the de facto training instructor, the real instructor approached him. He praised Minjun for his performance and handed him something from his pocket, instructing him to eat it when he was alone. Minjun hoped it wasn't just an advertisement but thought, please pay me anyway. If it was. Now, he held a mysterious pack in his hand, courtesy of the instructor. As Minjun pondered whether the instructor always carried snacks, he glanced at the pack. Just as he was about to start eating, Dongjin appeared and asked Minjun to critique his form during the break. Hiding the packet given by the instructor, Minjun wondered why Dongjin sought his advice. Dongjin explained that his specialty weapon was the sword, but he struggled to fight monsters with it. He asked Minjun for pointers. Minjun, knowing this was his boy, his homie, agreed to help. Dongjin demonstrated his form, performing quite well with the sword, while Minjun leaned against the wall, snacking on the chocolate sandwich and observing. Minjun noted that Dongjin's movements weren't the problem, it was something deeper. Private First Class Lee Dongjin's issue was confidence, something Minjun recognized from his own time in Isgard. Minjun knew that Dongjin would eventually transform into a top-tier hunter with the right guidance. He felt confident that he could help his friend gain the confidence needed to excel in combat. The chapter ended with anticipation for the advancement examination. At HQ, everyone was relaxing in various ways, some watching TV, others playing basketball or board games. Suddenly, an announcement blared from the speakers, instructing all hunters scheduled for the advancement examinations to proceed to the military training ground immediately. Everyone was caught off guard by the news, except for Minjun, who stood ready and determined. He knew that today was the day he would become a corporal. The sun shone on the young examinees' faces as they gathered at the military training grounds. The instructor for the exam, Second Lieutenant Kim Chi, because everyone is either Kim or Lee in this series, introduced himself as their guide through the exam. He began by checking the number of personnel from each company. As the examinees listened attentively, a bus pulled up, signaling that the exam would be held elsewhere. The second lieutenant stood by, checking off names as everyone boarded in an orderly fashion. Once everyone was seated, he announced that the exam would take place at the 105th Division. As the bus took off, he instructed the examinees to review their practice questions during the journey. The atmosphere was tense, with many feeling flustered. Minjun, eavesdropping on a conversation between two examinees, overheard them discussing how the 4th Battalion was also attending the advancement exams. This meant they would finally see some female participants in the series. One examinee was particularly excited about showcasing his weapons proficiency in front of the girls, hoping they might ask for his number. Minjun listened and laughed to himself, confident in his own abilities and amused by their enthusiasm. The bus ride to the 105th Division was scenic, with beautiful vistas lining the route. The military establishment's perimeters were evident upon arrival, showcasing tight security and discipline. The scene then shifted to written examination room number 7. The examinees had completed their written tests and were anxiously awaiting their results. Invigilator Kong announced that everyone had passed, except for Cho Jian-wook, the same guy who had been bragging about impressing the girls. The room erupted in laughter as Cho Jian-wook began to sweat nervously, realizing he wouldn't get to show off his skills. Outside the examination room, his friends teased him mercilessly for failing an exam deemed easier than a driver's license test. Meanwhile, Minjun remained unfazed, vibing on his own and enjoying the moment. He was confident and ready for whatever came next, knowing that this was just another step towards his goal of becoming a corporal. Everybody was walking in a straight line, ready for the physical exam. A familiar face appeared among the crowd, a blue-haired woman staring at the examinees as they entered a beautiful building at the 105th Division. Inside the auditorium, a speech was underway, given by Lieutenant Colonel Lee Cheolji, the man in charge of the advancement exam. He applauded the examinees for making it this far, emphasizing that the objective was not only to find worthy candidates for promotion but also to foster friendly competition between 3 different divisions. Minjun, feeling sleepy and impatient for the exam to start, perked up when Lieutenant Colonel Lee mentioned special exceptions. Lee called out Minjun's name, along with another named Private Sun Yoon, the blue-haired girl. He noted that these two had enlisted a year ago but had already shown exceptional talent. Minjun was excited to learn that there was someone else special like him. The nerds in the audience were the only ones paying close attention to Lee's speech. They discussed how applying to the front lines could lead to special exceptions and how many people had rejected offers to join the 104th Division. They speculated that if they hadn't, they could be like Minjun, who had already become a private first class. Their excitement grew as they whispered about Minjun's accomplishments, and their chatter turned heads, even drawing the attention of the blue-haired girl. Minjun noticed Sun looking at him. When their eyes met, she quickly turned away. Minjun pretended not to notice, though he had clearly caught her gaze. Lieutenant Colonel Lee continued his speech, telling everyone to do their best, though it seemed like few were listening. Finally, someone more practical took the stage, Captain Jong Sanchan. He announced the commencement of the tests for strength, agility, and stamina. The first test was for strength, which was straightforward. All they had to do was push back the examiner, a hulking figure named Dave Bautista. The challenge ahead was clear, and Minjun was ready to prove himself once again. Minjun remembered a previous exam where he had to push a huge redstone and wondered why all these tests were so similar. They had only a minute to complete this task, and if they managed to move Dave Bautista 10 meters backward, they would get the highest score on a 100-point scale. The examinees sat in front of the 10-meter squares marked on the ground, called up one by one to try their luck. First up was Private Kim from the 103rd Division. This guy was bulky, with a tight t-shirt showing off his muscles. He walked up to Dave Bautista and grabbed his shoulder, pushing with all his might. But Dave, solid as a rock, didn't budge. Kim's face turned red from the effort, almost as if he were giving birth, but a simple shoulder tap from Dave sent him flying, disqualified. The invigilator reminded everyone that a score below 40 meant immediate disqualification. The rest of the examinees were visibly nervous after witnessing Kim's defeat. One by one, they were swatted away by Dave, earning dismal scores of 10 or 20 before being disqualified. The invigilator was growing frustrated with their incompetence. Finally, it was time for someone interesting, Sun Yoon, the blue-haired girl. Despite her nervous sweat, she managed to pass. Though it would have been nice to see her exact performance, it was clear she scored 50 points, moving Dave 5 meters back. Everyone was shocked. This frail-looking girl had accomplished what they couldn't. She walked away confidently, the epitome of a girl boss, while the boys were awestruck by her beauty and rumored nepotism as the division commander's daughter. She judged them silently as she walked through the crowd of admirers, except for Minjun, who remained disinterested. However, Minjun was thinking about her too, how she was the only other person with a special exception like him. Now, it was his turn. The time had come for him to showcase his incredible strength. Minjun announced his arrival, mentioning his private first-class title as he confidently stepped forward towards Dave Bautista. Minjun had a plan. He knew he couldn't treat this situation like the redstone test because if he did, Dave Bautista would die. But if he could push him past the 10-meter mark, he might get a special bonus. With both hands front and center, all 5 fingers open, Minjun pushed hard and brash. Dave Bautista went flying. No one in his entire life had ever pushed him this far. The crowd was shocked. Their faces went white with envy and fear. Thankfully, Bautista managed to land on his feet. He wasn't just bulky like a bear, he was nimble like a cat. His feet dragged along the ground, leaving behind broken wood chips. Bautista was both shocked and enraged, and even the invigilator had no idea how this was possible. Private First Class Kim Minjun was the only person who managed to acquire 100 points. He smiled, knowing this was coming, but no one else had any clue, not even the blue-haired Nepo baby. As Minjun walked away, feeling the sun's gaze, he realized there weren't any bonus points after all. Minjun wasn't the final examinee. More were yet to be disqualified. A girl was sent away crying because she failed to push Dave Bautista more than 1 meter. The rest of the examinees stood there, wondering why this was so difficult. The strength test had finally ended, and it was time for the next one, the agility test. The agility test started without any breaks. Those who were disqualified walked off disappointed with their performances. Meanwhile, the staff was changing up the equipment and bringing in new stuff for the agility test. They set up a big green net and struggled a bit with it. Then they brought in a huge minigun. It looked like an anti-tank weapon, but it was just a big minigun for the agility test. The examinees were terrified, wondering if they were going to be made to dodge bullets after using up so much strength trying to push the behemoth, Dave Bautista. The invigilator laughed as he finally revealed they would indeed be dodging rubber bullets. It didn't matter if they were rubber bullets. They were being shot out at an unprecedented pace from what seemed like an anti-tank weapon. In other words, it would still hurt like a bullet. He told them to dodge everything, and they started looking as nervous as cats in a room full of rocking chairs. Minjun found this amusing and couldn't help but smirk at how interesting things had gotten. The man operating the gun looked like he was ready for a wild game of dodgeball, but with bullets. The goal was to dodge the bullets for a full minute. If they managed to last without getting hit, they'd score a perfect 10. Of course, they had to stay within the designated area inside the net. Adding to their fear was the fact that they could also pass by tanking the hits for a minute. They just had to endure it. Anyone who dashed out of the net in under 30 seconds or got seriously injured would be disqualified on the spot. Minjun heard a familiar voice behind him. As it called out to him, he turned in surprise. It was none other than his buddy, Private First Class Dongjin, grinning and waving like he just won the lottery. Minjun was shocked to see him there. He had no clue Dongjin had aced the strength test. Dongjin asked why he was so surprised. Did Minjun really think his buddy was going to flunk the strength test? Minjun denied it, though secretly, he kind of did. Come on, you probably did too. Dongjin explained that all the private first classes had passed the advancement exam before, so they were a bit used to the format. The only catch was that the score standards were higher for them, which is why Dongjin had been struggling. He gave Minjun a tip, saying that these rubber bullets flew just as fast as real ones, so dodging based on eyesight wasn't the way to go. As the bullets zipped out of the gun at lightning speed, he emphasized the importance of predicting their path and dodging accordingly. The bullets started flying, and the military training grounds erupted with screams. The first bullet hit a guy's skull, cracking it open and making him bleed. He collapsed, crying out in pain. Naturally, he was immediately disqualified, and an examiner escorted him to the infirmary. Minjun noticed a lot of people were getting disqualified just from the stat tests. Maybe that's why the pass rate was so low. But it made sense. The real monsters out there were much scarier than any test could prepare them for. Another examinee was disqualified for bolting out of the safety net, not wanting to get hit by the bullets. The invigilator was not having it. He called them cowards, reminding them that this test was a walk in the park compared to the sergeant advancement exam happening next door. People walked away disappointed and nervous about their performances. But hey, these tests were brutal, so let's cut them some slack. Not that they know I exist, I'm just a random narrator here. Eventually, someone interesting stepped up. It was none other than Private Sun Yoon, the blue-haired Nepo baby. She walked up to the safety net, cracking her fingers and ready for action. The bullets flew, and the crowd watched in anticipation, a bit nervous for her. They should have known better. She was leagues ahead of them. She dodged bullets like Neo from the Matrix, jumping, dodging, dashing, dancing, doing whatever it took to avoid the onslaught. The crowd was in awe. As the clock hit 57 seconds, even the invigilator applauded her. The 60 seconds finally passed, and Sun Yoon hadn't been hit once. She nailed a perfect score. As she walked past the crowd, everyone stared, amazed by her skill. She passed Minjun, giving him a mean look. He stared back, confused. The rest of the examinees speculated if they were dating, because why else would she look at him like that? She stepped slowly, staring deeply into Minjun's eyes, leaving him wondering what she wanted. Thankfully, the tension was broken by the invigilator announcing that it was Minjun's turn to bite the bullet or dodge it. He quickly turned away from her and walked towards the safety net. She still stared at him while walking away. "Guys, this tension is killing me." Minjun used his peripheral vision to see that she was still staring at him, making him a bit uncomfortable. Standing in front of the safety net, he wondered what she wanted. Was she expecting a compliment? But why, when they didn't even know each other? Lost in thought, he didn't realize the gun was primed and ready. The chamber went off, and the bullet zoomed towards him like a meteor. He quickly dodged it, moving his head away. The bullet was too slow for our hero. Sun was impressed. She saw him as a rival, but his skill was far ahead of hers. With his hands still in his pockets, Minjun decided to showcase his prowess to his blue-haired rival. As the bullets rained in, everyone was baffled. How was he doing this? Minjun effortlessly dodged every bullet with subtle, almost imperceptible movements. No jumps, no dash, just elegant curves of his body. Closing the gap between himself and the gun, he got so close that bullets whizzed past his face. He grinned at his rival, who looked utterly shocked and nervous. Meanwhile, Minjun continued to evade bullets, staring at her and chuckling. He was really getting under her skin. The invigilator was dumbfounded, forgetting to even check the time. It turned out the gun had been firing for a minute and 10 seconds before he called for a ceasefire. The bullet storm ceased, and Minjun stood just 2 steps away from the gun barrel. He had truly shown off today. Even if he didn't impress the ladies, though, he definitely scared them. The invigilator, unsure how to react, simply awarded Minjun a perfect score on the agility test and moved on to the next contestant, trying to regain his composure. With the agility test done and the afternoon wearing on, the remaining examinees were called together in front of a large blue portal gate. The invigilator, sweating profusely from the heat, praised their performance in the agility test and then announced the start of the stamina stat test. This final test seemed straightforward: race through the transforming dungeon beyond the big blue portal gate within 40 minutes. The catch: no one knew how far they had to march to reach the examiner at the turning point where they'd get their stamp. As Minjun marched with the other examinees, he wondered if they were all pacing themselves, given they had just begun. He started to contemplate whether he might get in trouble for sprinting ahead. He was getting bored of the slow pace. Just then, someone tapped his shoulder and breezed past him. It was none other than the blue-haired nepotism baby, zooming ahead and shooting him a challenging glance. It suddenly turned into a race. She took off running, and soon everyone followed suit. The long march had transformed into a fast-paced dash, fitting for the 40-minute time limit. Minjun couldn't help but be thrilled. She had just thrown down the gauntlet, and he wasn't one to shy away from a challenge. The blue-haired girl surged ahead, taking the lead and glancing back at him, clearly challenging him to keep up. He caught on quickly and burst into laughter, recognizing her competitive spirit and accepting the challenge with gusto. As the race intensified through the transforming dungeon, Minjun and his newfound rival, the blue-haired nepotism baby, pushed each other to their limits. The echoes of their footsteps mixed with the murmurs of other examinees striving to prove their stamina. As they raced towards the unknown turning point, the portal gate loomed ahead like a gateway to their next adventure. For Minjun and his fellow examinees, this was not just a test of physical endurance but a testament to their determination and spirit. Stay tuned for the next episode, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay alive.